Manever I say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there, I see them yopo.
Truly African.
You can invite me to BNI without, that is characteristic of me. I needed to know why anybody should invite me to BNI. But when I got to Vapo, I realized that there were news items that I had reported with one boss of mine. I don't want to mention his name on the program, and that we had been granted bail. So I realized that everything has been schemed. You can invite me to BNI without, that is characteristic of me. I needed to know why anybody should invite me to BNI. Uncle Kwasi, let me sing this. One may ask, why is he talking about this? I'm talking about these things so that it does not happen to another person. So that I will create the awareness for people to understand how certain things happen. People should be aware of this. And I am standing to canvass and make sure that these are human rights issues. People get to know how the BNI operates out of the law. Well, during the interrogation with my lawyers, I had already thought of some of the reasons why they may be inviting me, and from the stories that have gone on already, and the fact that even on the platform where the minister threatened me, there was a discussion on this same coup, alleged coup.
Well, hello and welcome to Talk Time. This week, to be honest with you, I'm very excited about doing this interview. Because in many ways, this interview is special. And it's special to the extent that we're going to be talking about a very distinguished man. A man who has been through a lot of pain. A man who has been put on a treason trial which could result in death. And one who still gives us a lot of hope. Welcome to Talk Time. Welcome back to Talk Time, and as I indicated from the very beginning, this is a very special interview for me because we're going to be talking about the tribulations of a very special man, a man who served in the police service, who definitely wanted to protect his countrymen and women from harm, who wanted to bring down crime and so on, who became outspoken at a certain point in his career, and eventually ended up facing treason trial. Since his acquittal, he's had a number of interviews and so on. And perhaps a lot of what he has to say has been said. But this program is going to go beyond what he has said already and to try and find out who this man really is. What are the things that moves him? What are his concerns for Ghana? And how is he taking his pain? Because obviously he suffered a lot of pain. We are talking about ACP Dr. Benjamin K. Agordzor, I hope I got the name correct, who is here with us in the studio to tell us this story. Doctor, you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much, and I'm privileged to be here.
It seems to many people that you are not a very normal policeman. You hardly hear of policemen, with doctorate degrees and so on. How did you end up in the police service?
Thank you very much, Uncle Kwasi. Let me first of all say that I never knew I was ever going to be a police officer. After my sixth form and national service, I went to the University of Cape Coast. And at the University of Cape Coast, there was that year where almost 1 year there was a strike. And therefore, when I came home, within 3 months of the strike, there was this advert recruiting police officers across the country. I spoke to a few people, And then I just decided that, well, let me just go and get some employment, and then maybe after a while, I'll go back to school on study leave. And true to that, I got recruited, served for 3 or 4 years, went back to school on study leave, finished the first degree, got a scholarship to Norway, did my MPhil, and then later on, got another scholarship to Italy where I did a PhD. So I actually enlisted in the police service as a constable. Wow. And then I rose through the ranks, did my courses, and then eventually ended up having a PhD.
What was your PhD in?
My PhD is in human rights and politics. And that tells the story. Naturally, I'm the outspoken type. I hardly will keep quiet over things that affect me and affect others. Even back in school, I did the same. And I would say that often it got me into certain kind of troubles, but it never stops me from talking about things that are of concern to me and then to others. So when I did the PhD in human rights, and politics, the relationship between human rights and politics, you could see that strengthened me much more with that knowledge and the background. Definitely, you can't do a PhD in human rights without reading international human rights law and all that. And coupled with the fact that I have been a police officer, and then practically and also theoretically, and also with a research background, that's the one that makes me more outspoken about issues. And I don't think I'll ever stop talking anyway.
Did you ever think that your outspoken nature could become an impediment in your practice as a police officer?
I would say that within the police service, it doesn't surprise me. The police has its own culture, where it is, maybe things have changed a bit, but not much. I wouldn't say it has changed a bit. That culture or subculture is still there, where it is, yes sir, no sir. You are supposed to take instructions. You are supposed to take directives. And so it's gotten me into trouble a number of occasions, but it never scares me, or it never stops me from doing and I've narrated how it got me into trouble in Bolga, where I was giving instructions which I thought were unlawful. And not just I thought were unlawful, it was completely unlawful. And yet, when I resisted it and I said no, I ended up being dismissed. And that is the kind of culture I work. And if I were somebody, I could have kept quiet after that incident, but it never stopped me from keeping quiet. It even ended up causing my reduction in rank from superintendent to DSP. I rose back to assistant commissioner, and I kept talking. Naturally, I'm also a teacher, and also by profession, because I attended University of Cape Coast. And therefore, coming back to the police service, my teaching and everything was almost always against the status quo. A lot of people enjoyed it. Others were very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And that also got me into trouble at Police Academy, where one day, I remember after giving a lecture, the whole IGP had to drive. I mean, he was on tour in Brunafo or somewhere. He had to stop the tour and then drove straight to Police Academy just because of me. And this is on record. And a number of other things. But I can't stop talking about the ills of society. I can't stop talking about ills in the police service. Even, it doesn't matter what I've gone through now, I'll still speak out when I think that things are not going the way they ought to be.
How did you get back into the service after your dismissal?
When I was dismissed, I saw it as another opportunity. There's something about me. Anytime I get into some trouble, I just see it as an opportunity, just like this one. So back to your question, when I was dismissed, I had this application form, which was already with me for a PhD, and I never paid attention to it. So as soon as I heard that I had been dismissed, I quickly paid attention to it. I heard that in, let me be specific, that was in September 2007. No, yes, 2007, September 2007, when I was dismissed. And so I quickly took the application, filled it very well with all my papers that I had written and articles that I had written, at least in school and other things, or essays that I had written, and quickly posted that article, those applications. September, October, by November, I had gotten a scholarship. So whilst people were maybe thinking that I was out of the police service, I was only waiting for January to come so that I could go to school. And then I also appealed against the dismissal. So whilst I was in Italy pursuing my PhD, I received information that the police council then had reviewed my petition and had decided that the punishment was too excessive and whatever, and therefore they decided that they were recalling me and also substituting a reduction in rank to dismissal. I returned during a holiday, and then I applied for study leave, and I went back to finish my course and came back to the police service again.
What did you do which was considered so offensive as to merit even a reduction in rank?
Let me put on record that police service can be very funny. It can be a very funny institution. That is why sometimes things happen that, and just like society today, when it happens to you, everybody is quiet and you have to fight your own battle. The majority of people, nobody will even talk about it, just as we are experiencing today. There was this thoroughfare behind the police barracks. The police cell. Mm-hmm. The cells, and then adjacent to the cell, adjacent to the cell was the armory and all kinds of things. So there was this, I don't want to mention him, there was this powerful woman at the time who was politically linked and everything, who had a hotel behind the police quarters in the barracks. So instead of using the thoroughfare, they decided always to use the police station and also pass behind the police cell. When I assumed duty there, I realized it was a security risk. Mm-hmm. So I decided to close it. When I closed it, the woman came to me. My son, I said, so after appealing to me, I said, you see, I understand your concerns. People may not want to go that far. But the fact is that it's a security risk. We have the cells there, and deep night, anybody can take advantage of passing there and then do something untoward. But the woman never understood me, so she went to the regional commander then, whose name I wouldn't mention. He's passed now. Then the regional commander understood me and even followed me to the police station, inspected the place, and said, well, the barrier should stay. Interestingly, after 3 days, the same regional commander returns to my office with the woman and orders me to open the barrier. And that closure, I should just open it to allow the woman to pass there with her customers. I told my commander there and then that, look, I don't think that it was good for you to sacrifice the interests of the police service for the interests of this woman. So match me before the IGP. The commander will not listen. All right, so he went back and then sent me a letter indicating that I had been suspended from the police service. Interestingly, at that time, there was nothing like suspension in the police service. So I wrote back to my regional commander indicating that so far as the police service status were concerned, and are still concerned, there was nothing like suspension. And therefore, insisted that he matched me before the IGP. The next thing I realized, and I told the woman was so powerful, the next thing I realized was that I had been interdicted and referred for service inquiry. And before I realized, I had been removed from the police service. This was my crime. And you see, it happened so fast that, and it was it was meant to frustrate me, but you know, I cannot be frustrated. So I had always gotten plans for myself and other things. So when it happened, I appealed and started working on other things. Before they realized I had traveled. In fact, not many people. And there is something I would like to mention on record. Remember at that time, Madam Robertson was the most senior police commissioner at the time. She refused, and I want it to be on record, she refused to sign my removal from the police service because she felt it was not proper.
So at least there was a woman of
There was a woman who stood and said, no, this what you are doing to this gentleman was not proper. And yet there were certain people who were bent on removing me. And so they quickly co-opted others into it and signed it. And you know, by 2007, I would say our democracy had not taken that route. Going to court with this kind of things wasn't the fashion at the time. And I can tell you that in the past, police officers had gone to court and they were dismissed. I mean, just going to court. I mean, I don't want to go into those ones. But, and so it wasn't fanciful at that time to go to court. So you just had to go back to the same police administration for the same people to review and decide that instead of dismissal, they were going to reduce you in rank and other things. So there was this woman, Madam Robertson, and I will always mention her name. If she's listening to me, this is her story, and I thank her for standing firm at the time.
So now you're back in the police service. And you had no doubt that there were problems in the police service.
Yes.
There's a certain level of arbitrariness and so on.
Absolutely.
Why would you go back to such an institution?
I've always wanted to serve my nation and serve as a police officer. When it wasn't part of my plans, but when I enlisted and realized the nature of the service, I thought we could make change. I thought with this kind of attitude and other things, with the kind of conservative attitude and nature that we had in the police service, we could use our background and other things. So I never thought of leaving. And I don't even regret, as we speak here today, I don't even regret it. Because you see, sometimes some of us must go through this to strengthen others. And I can tell you today that what I've gone through in the police service has strengthened others. And a lot of things have changed. Let me give you a typical example. Today, there are a lot of police platforms that are talking and speaking their minds. People took inspiration partly from me. People speak their minds, even against the IGP. The IGP tried to collapse the platform. He could not, because some of us will be there and they will say, never, you can't collapse it. I mean, I have a right to belong to a platform to discuss things. Once it is not a direct insult against you, that once it is not planning of a coup, maybe. Once it is not anything,
donating to an NGO.
Yes, yeah, maybe. Yeah. If it is not anything dangerous to the security of the state, we can speak our minds. And I can tell you a lot of people take inspiration from me. And therefore, sometimes I may not get a direct benefit, but I think that it has benefited the service. My story is still an inspiration to many others, because the story of standing firm is not an easy one. For instance, this Bulgar thing, officers came to me saying, why don't you apologize to the regional commander? I said, no, why should I go and apologize to him? What did I do wrong? Because people felt once I went to apologize to him, it was possible for him to just say, okay, no, I wasn't going to apologize. He could do his worst, just as these people have done their worst, but God has vindicated me. I always believe in the truth, and I will stand for the truth.
I suspect that you were at your outspoken best when you spoke about appointments, how appointments are made into the police service, and how that impacts on the political neutrality of the service. You remember, I saw that tape.
Yeah.
What were your concerns then?
See, Kwasi, my concerns at the time, among others, were that, I served in the police service at a certain close to strategic position, because as the director of operations, although I wasn't the IGP or Director General, I had worked at a certain level where decision making was partly my duty. And I had also seen at first hand interferences in the police service. Now, I like to put on record, for instance, and those interferences, I do not blame the political leaders. I want to put that one on record, that I do not blame the political leaders. I always blame the constitution that we are working with. Because when you have a constitution which tells you that the president could appoint anybody to act in a particular position in the police service, why would you blame any president for influencing the posting of a regional commander? You cannot, because that is what the constitution tells us. So I had seen on a number of occasions where postings are done and influence from outside the police service. And even within this government, I had seen situations where postings were proposed from the Flagstaff House and brought to the IGP to sign. So both in the past and in the present, I had seen them all. So when I had the opportunity to talk and to deal with political vigilantism, I fused the whole idea of how could we get out of that quagmire called political vigilantism, and how are we going to make the police service a bit independent so that police bosses could take independent decisions and stick to them. We have seen a lot of things, for instance, today. Let me just digress. Look at what happened last weekend. Certain political figures made certain statements. Was the IGP able to go and arrest them? But we have seen other statements made in a similar way, but the IGP went for them. Why did he not go for the ministers who threatened people? He cannot do it. It doesn't matter how robust we are praising him, but can he do it? Because he cannot act against the system that is feeding him. And secondly, he is not independent. And once he tries it, he will go home. Those are the things I spoke about. And I will speak about them today and speak about them tomorrow. Unless we change the constitution to make the police what it should be, nobody will be safe. Even my investigations, it was purely political. I can tell you that at the time I was arrested, the sitting IGP knew nothing about it. Yes, he knew nothing about it. He just went through the back door. The only thing he knew about it was that I was invited through him. And whatever the details were, he did not know about it. Until later on, I requested that, look, can't you people request for a report on why I had been arrested before they wrote a report? And I have proofs of it as to when I was arrested and when that report came to the IGP. So you see, this is the kind of thing. The political interference is too much, and if we don't do anything about it, it's not about me. It's about every citizen in this country, where political figures can determine your future, can determine when you will sleep. And I had already indicated how I was threatened on a platform, and then a political figure decided to change my sleeping place. And that's what he achieved in doing. Now, if we had an independent police service, the IGP could say, no, you can't do this. I am in charge of these investigations. Because the investigation started with us and then somewhere, and he could insist that this cannot happen. So unless we have an independent police service, listen to conversations about elections and other things, and you see that there's a problem. But during our time, during the 2016 election, when I was director of operation together with Mr. Olun as my director general, and then Mr. Kudalo as the IGP, you saw what happened during the elections. We insisted, and nobody could direct us, and nobody interfered with my work. Maybe others, they could, but my work, they could not interfere. Maybe nobody even tried it. We insisted, and you remember, there weren't any soldiers at the polling station. Nobody got near it, and not even a fly died. Compare it with other subsequent elections, and you see the clear political interferences.
Now, viewers, we are talking to ACP Dr. Benjamin Kojo Agordzor, and you know the story. When we come back from this very short break, I'll try and find out from him when he got to know that he was in trouble with regards to his trial for treason. Short break. Well, welcome back to this conversation with ACP Dr. Benjamin Kwasi Agordzor. Now, Doc, you've just been on trial. When and how did you get to know that you were in trouble?
I got to know I was in trouble, I think, on the early week of November 2019. I had just returned from giving lectures at University of Education, Winneba, the Center for Conflict and Human Rights. And then I received a call from the then IGP. A strange number, of course, so I didn't know it was his number. But when he spoke, the urgency in his voice indicated that there was something amiss. So he asked me to come to the office right now. I said I wasn't around, but he insisted that however I was going to get there, I should. So I managed to get there, and he told me, he informed me that the BNI wanted to see me the following day. It was a Thursday, so they wanted to see me the following day, which was a Friday. Now, interestingly, I had returned from peacekeeping mission, and I had not reported to the police service yet. So I told him I had a funeral that following day, and I asked for the reasons for the invitation. He never gave me the reason. He told me that they didn't give any reasons. And I said, sir, but you can't invite me to BNI without, that is characteristic of me. I needed to know why anybody should invite me to BNI, and they never gave any reasons. So I told the IGP, please, could you find out why they invited me? Meanwhile, I wasn't going to report the Friday. I will report on Monday. So the IGP agreed, and then I traveled. But when I got to Vapo, I realized that there were news items that I had reported with one boss of mine. I don't want to mention his name on the program, and that we had been granted bail. So I realized that everything has been schemed.
You hadn't reported.
I hadn't reported.
There was news that
there was news item that had been reported. I had been given bail together with that boss of mine, who was then a commissioner of police, also in active service. So I realized there was something. Having been in the service for this long and having understood the way and manner these people work. So I quickly informed my lawyer, and we planned our strategy. The Monday I reported to the police, to the headquarters, and the IGP asked me to report. I asked whether they've given reasons. He said no reason, but I should just go. So I obliged and went, and that was the beginning of the trouble. I got to realize that they wanted to initially even separate me from my lawyers at the BNI. I said, no, you cannot separate me from my lawyers. If you had any questions to ask me, and I had already known how they do their work. Mm-hmm. See, Uncle Kwasi, let me say this. One may ask, why is he talking about this? I'm talking about these things so that it does not happen to another person. So that I will create the awareness for people to understand how certain things happen. As an assistant commissioner of police, I went through this. Maybe you don't have the status that I have, so you may suffer more than I did. But I needed to tell this story for people to be aware. There is this culture where they always ensure that no lawyer accompanies a suspect into the interrogation room. I was aware. And therefore, when they tried to separate me, I realized that they wanted me to get into the interrogation room so that they could leave my lawyers there to stay there until they were tired and then they go home. That's the strategy. So I refused. And I think that angered them, frankly. And so out of the 10 people, 10 of us who were accused, I was the only person whose lawyers were present during my interrogation. And you come to appreciate that this same interrogation in the absence of their lawyers were used against them. Although, I must admit, the court, in its wisdom, disregarded some part of it. I wouldn't say all, particularly in respect of Colonel Gameli. Okay. But they will send you into the interrogation room amongst themselves and come out with stories that you admitted, you confessed. And these same things will be used in evidence against you in court. People should be aware of this. And I am standing to canvass and make sure that these are human rights issues. People get to know how the BNI operates out of the law. And then make sure that, it doesn't happen to others.
So how did you get to know that you were being questioned for subversion or treason or whatever?
Well, during the interrogation with my lawyers, I had already thought of some of the reasons why they may be inviting me, and from the stories that have gone on already, and the fact that even on the platform where the minister threatened me, there was a discussion, and I stated it on the said platform with the minister. I knew the person, all that. So I knew that it was in connection with that, and they questioned me about my presence on that platform. I agreed that I was on that platform, but there was nothing like this, no discussion on coup d'etat. They insisted there was. I said they should show me evidence, and they didn't show me evidence. They said I wrote a speech, but they refused to show me evidence of the speech. They said I paid money. No, they didn't say I paid money. During the interrogation, I was the one who told them that, look, I had met this man once, and I know that he was involved in this medical outreach program. And so, as part of my contribution, I gave him 2,000. Master Kwasi, let me tell you something, and I like the whole world to listen to this. There was this platform called the executive platform. I was never placed on that platform. The BNI and the intelligence agencies claim that that was where the planning of the coup was done. With the benefit of disclosures, I also had to read, and I saw that there was, okay, I will skip that for very good reasons. But if you claim that that was where the thing was planned, and there were professors on that platform, there were lawyers, not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, on that platform. There were engineers, there were medical officers, there were even journalists on that platform. Some of them, interestingly, also contributed from that platform, executive platform. They contributed towards this medical report, some of them in dollars. But you see that they skipped all of them and then came for me And that tells you that I only went through persecution and not a trial. They just singled me out, maybe for my outspokenness. And that is why I said that any security analyst or any analyst worth his salt who decides or who thinks that my arrest and trial could be divorced from the IDEC presentation doesn't understand how these things work. Because once you begin to, especially in this part of the world, you begin to speak passionately about some of these issues, people take them personal and they think they are attacking them. Look, you can attack the presidency without attacking former President Mahama. You can attack the presidency without attacking the current president, Nana Akuffo Addo. You are attacking a system in place. A system that anybody who knows the next president. So when you talk about the presidency, it's different from the presidency of a particular person. But you see, they took it personal. And I received messages from defense intelligence and other places, some of the security agencies, to say, look, they are looking for you. Because remember, I had also worked with them at certain high level. Calling me to say, Ben, be careful. And so when people begin to chest out to say, no, it has nothing to do with either, they don't understand. And maybe they have to learn a lot how these things work.
What was the specific allegation against you? What did you do? Did you buy guns? Did you manufacture bombs? What did you do? What were you alleged to have done?
Kwasi, I've told you, they said I had written a speech for them to be read after the overthrow. They said the money I told you I gave to the man, they said that I had given the 2,000 to support the cause of the overthrow. And then I had also discussed issues of Arab Spring on the platform. And for that matter, I was abetting the man, MacPalm. These were the specific allegations against me. And I knew right from the beginning they were false. Uncle Pratt, you need to know the content of the alleged speech, which the court admitted I never wrote, which the witnesses admitted were not uttered by me. They were forwarded messages that were doing the rounds, and they concern political vigilantes and the dangers that they pose. Those were the speech. And remember, at that time, this group was thinking of going on demonstration against West Wogon by-election violence. And therefore, that was the team. And so when I saw that, I forwarded it, and they requested me to write, and it was on the platform. And I asked, what was on your mind? Specifically, and the court actually even came to that conclusion. I asked Dr. McFarm, you are asking of writing and planning. What is on your mind? He said, no, let's write a speech about to read after the demonstration, and also and those were some of the things that he talked about. And so when I forwarded that to him, it wasn't a speech to be read for an illegal or violent overthrow of government. And that is why I will always say that I have been persecuted. And another reason why I will tell you I have been persecuted was the fact that they started peddling lies, falsehoods. For instance, I never knew Kenneth Gameli. But will you believe that the prosecution went ahead to say that I met with Gameli and we discussed this issue. And then we met with Dr. McPalm to discuss how to overthrow the government. And they did all this, published them in their facts, and the whole world believed them. Unfortunately, at that time, there was no way I could defend myself. So I had to keep quiet and endure these falsehoods And they kept reading the facts at every little opportunity. And they were being produced in the media until I got the opportunity almost 4 years later to open my defense. And I think that there is something that the system must do about this way of presenting their cases, where the prosecution has the whole time to peddle falsehoods here and there, and the accused persons are so disadvantaged to the point that once you are in court, you cannot talk, and yet they will continue to peddle falsehoods.
Okay. Now you are in BNI.
Yeah.
You have been told about this connection and so on. But if you read the case, there's an element of donation. How did that element come about? Did you make a donation? Are you that rich? How much did you donate and for what?
I've already explained that as part of TAG's objectives, they were doing a medical outreach program. And I've told you how people on the executive platform even contributed, some of them in dollars. And so when that caught my attention, I decided to also, I had even promised on the platform in writing that when I return, I'll also contribute my quota. And so when I came back, I contributed my quota to that medical outreach program. And interestingly, I kept following up on the medical outreach program on the platform, which was made available to the BNI or to the investigative bodies. But they ignored all that and decided to slap me with abetment of high treason or treason felony without any basis. But you see, they did that because they knew it was going to take me years to come out, by which time I don't think they even ever anticipated I would be talking about these things. Because people suffer this, and then once they are released, they are quiet. They don't talk about it. And that's my motivation, to talk about it and to ensure that others don't go through this. Or at least others are enlightened. And when they are going through this, they know exactly what to do. They slap with the higher crime charge, and they know that the system is not going to be charitable to you. And you are going to go the entire haul. By the time you are acquitted and discharged, look, between 2019 and 2024, how many years? Almost 5 years. If I decided after my acquittal and discharge not to talk like many others do or did in the past, who will hear of this side of the story? But even before you continue, do you know, for instance, that I've received too many calls to advise me strongly not to talk? I should be quiet. Once I've been acquitted and discharged, let's leave the battle for God. Yes, I know God. I believe in the God factor, and I prayed a lot, and I know it was God who saved me from their hands. But I wouldn't keep quiet, because I believe that somebody must speak about these things to shame them, and I know they are not comfortable with it, and then for others to learn from this. They should stop doing this to others. They've done it to me. By the grace of God, I've been able to withstand it, and I'm here. How many people will be able to withstand this?
We're going to go for another short break, and when we come back, sir, I'd like to ask you a very simple question. Simple, but yet somehow difficult. Did you believe, or do you still believe, that there was a coup attempt? Short break. Welcome back to Talk Time, and we are in this conversation, which I think is exciting, with ACP Dr. Benjamin Kwasi Agordzor. Now, sir, did you or do you believe that there was a coup attempt? And this is a serious question.
Sorry.
Because whatever you say would impact on the judgment that, has been served to others and so on?
I have told myself that I will not comment on that. And I'll stand by that. Whether there was coup attempt or coup whatever, so far as I'm concerned, I was never involved in any coup discussion. I was never aware of whatever gadgets they brought to court as exhibits. I was never aware of them. I never met any other party apart from meeting Colonel Dr. McPalm at a hotel where I gave him that amount to support a cause which I consider to be noble. And there was evidence on the platform that, and pictures on the platform that they had undertaken those medical outreach programs in Upper West, in the Volta region, in the Eastern region, maybe I think, if my memory serves me right, in the Central region or thereabout. So that was the cause that I was supporting. I was never in for any coup. And remember, if you look at my background, I have been to a number of peacekeeping missions. I have taught human rights at many levels, including in China. In fact, I can put it on record for you to know that I was the first black to have taught in Chinese International Peacekeeping, Police Peacekeeping Training Center, which trained the first Chinese police for peacekeeping in Sierra Leone. Mm-hmm. I went there to do that, and I followed up. And I had taught around the globe. I had worked closely with the African Union, developing programs for them. I was part of the, you know the reason why during the trial the European Union was called, I sought permission to go and teach in Kenya, which the court in its wisdom decided to deny me. Because even as a PhD candidate in Italy, in my school, I was a member of the European group of trainers that was assigned to African Union to do needs assessment, training needs assessment, and then develop training for the African Union, African Standby Force, and other things. Mm-hmm. Taught all around the group. There was no way I could have been part of it. So to answer your question again, I have no idea about any coup, and I cannot tell whether coup was being planned or any other thing like that happened. The wisdom of the court, let's stick to that, and that's it.
When and how did you first meet Dr. Palm?
Dr. McPalm, during November 2018, when I was traveling to...
That's the principal accused person?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was in Entebbe, undergoing a UN program. And he called me. That was just it was just about a week or less than a week after my IDEC presentation. In fact, I left Ghana just days after my IDEC presentation. Mm-hmm. So he called on my WhatsApp platform. He had even indicated on the WhatsApp platform, which is available to the investigative bodies, the source from which he got my number. So he called and talked about the IDEC presentation and the fact that I could be of help to their the NGO. Mm-hmm. And I asked for the profile of the NGO, which he sent to me. And in summary, it was democracy-oriented NGO. And remember, this was read even in open court. That look, this was what he was aware of, and this was what made me follow that and that join that platform. And so, on one of my the holidays that I came to Ghana, I met him. Mm-hmm. And then, after some brief discussions, I gave him that amount in support of the medical outreach program. I informed the investigative body that I gave the money. Mm-hmm. They did not capture this on any camera. They were not there when I gave it. Dr. McPalm even testified in court that I gave him the money for that purpose. And yet they insisted that the money was for another purpose. And those were some of the things that... So that's how I met him. And that was the last time I met him. And I kept following up on, how about the medical outreach program? Then he gave me a story that they couldn't go, they will go the next week. Then another time, I asked him, said, okay, they went there, the Queen Mother said they were doing something. So I inquired about it 3 times, and then we ceased communication. Or we ceased communication, all kinds of communication. And then what I heard next was that he had been arrested. So when he was arrested, on some platform that I said, I knew this man. I was open enough to say, look, I know this man. Is it that I don't know him too well? So certain personalities, I don't want to mention names, on the platform, do you mean you know this man and you had met me before? I said, yes, I know him. I had met him once. So with my previous conversation and chats, which people were not comfortable with, they took me on. And then reposted my comments and said I was way off the mark, I should be brought to order. And that was 2 weeks after that, I was arrested.
Now, at the point when you were arrested, you've already said that you knew you were innocent and you were not worried. Did you ever cross your mind? And being a police officer, of course, you know of many cases of injustice in history and so on. Did it ever cross your mind that you could be killed?
By the police officers or by...
No, after trial, sentenced to death.
Oh. Uncle Kwasi, let me say with all humility that it never crossed my mind, because I knew there was no way anybody, any court could find me guilty. You see, I have been an investigator for many years. And the name of the game is evidence. If you don't have evidence, maybe in kangaroo courts you may succeed. But so far as I'm concerned, no court in Ghana was going to ever convict me. That's why I was saying that if they like, they should go on appeal. Because you see, you don't have the evidence against me. And right from day one, I knew they didn't have the evidence. Maybe they had some other motivation which they did not make clear. And I don't have a problem if they invited me, took my statement, and then as part of investigation. But to go ahead and charge me, I knew that, of course I knew once they charged me for treason felony, it was going to take years. I knew. But it never occurred to me that I could be killed, because I knew I could never be found guilty. Do you remember the first time I gained bail? I got bail?
Yeah.
Do you remember that it was a self-recognizance bail?
Yes.
I don't want to say anything beyond that. A judge looked at the facts. Look at what everything that the prosecution had brought on board. Looked at my facts. And whatever we also offered in defense, and said no. I could grant this person bail, not just a bail, but a self-recognizance bail. Do you know one of the things that was even, I went out and printed every presentation I had done. Uncle Kwasi, do you know that even as part of my lectures at the University of Education, I mentioned Arab Spring? We gave, it is with them, it is the prosecution. And we use it to defend ourselves that, look, this is not something new to me. It is a subject matter I had dealt with, and I understood it, and I knew what it really meant. So even at the as early as 2019, we had presented my lecture notes, which they could verify from students. They didn't do any of those things. That tells you that I was persecuted. I wasn't just persecuted, because they knew the facts, but they just ignored everything and went just telling a one-sided story which they knew was going to take years for me to have the opportunity to defend myself.
What were the conditions of your imprisonment? I mean, the physical environment, the psychological environment, and so on. What were the conditions of your detention?
My detention at BNI, for me, BNI, where you have no idea of the time, nobody talks to you, you are not allowed to see your relatives, your wife or your children. And if your wife or children want to see you, it will take them 7 hours. And therefore, when they come once, they will not come again. And there were times that they will come and will end up not seeing you. Was for me a torture. Because when you decide that you will keep people in isolation, it was a form of torture. Because we cannot just exist without communicating with, and people should know, and even be able to defend yourself. If anybody who thinks they could be at BNI custody and be able to defend themselves very well, anybody who thinks that way will be a joker. Because you don't easily have access to your lawyers, access to things that you could depend on. I said it elsewhere. If I was still in custody, and then the issue of bailable, every case is bailable, had not come up, it meant I was going to be in custody for all the 4 years plus. There was no way I could successfully defend myself. And I like to repeat this for the sake of the public. It meant you were going to be in custody. I was going to be in custody. It meant that I wasn't going to have access to the phone, the content of which was being used to charge me, and I wasn't going to have the content available to cite against them, and within which context I use certain words. For instance, they say I mentioned Big Bang. Big Bang is a simple idiomatic expression. But they went in for Big Bang to say that it meant to them that I advocated for Arab Spring that would serve as a Big Bang to all kinds of fabrications that. But if I did not have access to my phones, there was no way I could remember all the context and quote the context within which I wrote these things. But because I was on bail, and I was also in police custody, and I was also subsequently in custody, IGP's custody, I had access to some of these things, and I started putting together my thoughts on paper to defend myself. How could I do that in prisons? So I have come to understand much more, although I knew that people went to prison, and not everybody is complicit. And that many innocent people have gone there innocent. I've come to understand that one of the circumstances under which people go there, and it is also the doing of the security or the intelligence officer. They deny you of everything. Everything that you will use to defend yourself, you are denied. And therefore, you will go in. It is their word against your word. So they bring 13 witnesses. And that out of the 13 witnesses, about 5 are saying the same thing. You are not able to defend. When I was called upon to open my defense, the judges were specific. I should explain why I gave the 2,000. I should explain why I mentioned springboard and Arab Spring, and at what circumstances I did that. How could I have done that without my phone? And I've said this elsewhere, I'm repeating. In some cases, they collected the phones of the accused persons, and after whatever they did, they flashed it. Every information on the phone was deleted. I don't want to mention them, but if I'm pushed, I will. They just deleted.
I wish I could push you.
Very good, but I can tell you that Bright, what do you call this accused person? think it's the third accused person, Bright. Bright's phone was flashed. He told me, and even told his lawyer, instead of the lawyer also taking it up, well, I don't know why he didn't take it up. But this person's phone was taken by the NIB. It wasn't part of the exhibit, and therefore they made application to go for it. They had apparently, and Bright had alleged that he was beaten before his password was taken, because he didn't want to give them his password, but they forced him to give his password, and therefore they had access to the password and they opened it. When he went back to the phone, there was no information on them. So if Bright wanted to use the information on the phone to defend himself, there was no information on it. So these are some of the things that, for me, I know people mean well when they say stop talking, because some people, if you go to, they will kill you, they will go after you, similar to what they said during the after my IDEC presentation. But somebody must speak about this. Somebody must tell the story. Somebody must speak out to guide others in future. Lawyers must take note of some of these things. We cannot have a situation where the BNI is a no-go area for lawyers. When I was arrested, my wife didn't know that I had already spoken to Martin Pebu, a fantastic lawyer with his team, who followed me to the place. So my wife also called another lawyer. Do you know that the lawyer never came there? Even though he wasn't aware that. Because once you mention BNI, some lawyers, I must say, some lawyers are not willing to go there because of the frustration. And because of that, the accused persons are isolated and are at the mercy of the investigative, and they can do anything, including abuses. And we must, and I'm a human rights activist, I think we must speak about this and stop this. Because it has happened to me, you don't know who it will happen to next.
We are going to go to the last segment of this conversation. And here, I'd like us to focus on what are you going to do. First of all, you've been discharged, acquitted and discharged at a time when you can no longer be in the police service. You've reached retiring age. What are you going to do about yourself? How are you going to find your sustenance and so on? And then there are other issues. Short break. Well, welcome back to Talk Time. And we are in this conversation with ACP Dr. Benjamin Kwasi Agordzor. Now, Doc, I heard the Attorney General say that the evidence against you was weak or was not watertight. The question which arises is, why did he then continue with the prosecution to the very end if he knew that the case was not tight? Under some circumstances, some lawyers would argue that this would amount to malicious prosecution. What do you intend to do about this aspect of your trial? Fact that Attorney General admits that your case was not watertight.
I'm happy you mentioned this. And the same Attorney General last week during Newsfile said something revealing. According to him, he would have been pained, and I'm quoting him, he would have been pained if I had been convicted. Just to support what you had said. He knew the case against me wasn't watertight. The accusation, the evidence they had against me wasn't watertight. But he went ahead to prosecute me. And then the same person sits in court after almost 4-5 years of persecuting me. I don't want to use certain word, but I think it's hypocrisy for him to say that when he sat in court, he told his colleagues that if I were convicted, he would have been paid. How could you be prosecuting somebody and wish that he will not be convicted? Why did you go ahead of it? You see, the whole agenda, right from the beginning, was to ensure that I didn't return to the police service. The whole agenda, because remember, I had been removed before, I managed to come back, and the era I talked about, cast your mind back and see who were in power. I don't want to say anything. So they saw this as another opportunity. Okay, the conversation was that he escaped the first one. As for this one, he can't come back. And then they realized that the evidence against me was weak. So the only thing they could resort to was delay the time in such a way that even if I was acquitted and discharged, there was no way I could come back. So my sister's birthday was in November. January, there was judgment. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a well-calculated thing. How was it calculated? Remember, first we were arrested and charged for treason felony. And then we went through the process, jurors were selected and other things, and the trial was to begin. Then Attorney General comes in with a nolle prosequi. And Kwasi, do you know that the nolle prosequi wasn't made available to us? Do you know that my lawyers were not served with the nolle prosequi? Even after our rearrest, they didn't have access to it. It was the following week that my lawyer had to apply before he got access to it. Those were all indications that they were doing something malicious and mischievous. Then, Attorney General decides that, okay, he was going to escalate the charge from treason felony to high treason, which was a higher crime, the highest crime on the land, with more severe penalty. And then you sit there and say you wish, or you'll be pained if I were to be convicted. I mean, hypocrisy. I can't restrain myself from using that word. And then you also confess to the world that the evidence was weak. But let me just continue. You then quickly charge us with a new crime, and then you put us before court. I am not a lawyer, and I stand to be corrected. But I know the Attorney General, when he submits or when it comes to nolle prosequi, it's not obliged to explain to anybody the reasons.
Sure.
But when you go to the literature, amongst the many reasons could be that they don't have sufficient evidence, or there is a new evidence, and therefore there's a nolle prosequi, and so they can escalate the charge or maybe come for a lesser charge. In our case, once you escalate it, it meant that you needed to do new disclosures. You asked us to write new statement. Okay? So it meant that you have new facts. But we go to court and Attorney General says, well, I'm going to depend on the old facts which we read during the previous treason felony charge, and then the disclosures are the same. And those are some of the things that I believe that we should all look at. Was it normal for the Attorney General to just say, I will depend on the same facts, the disclosures are the same, we are not going to change anything, and that we should just go ahead, and yet the case has been escalated. All these things were meant for a delay tactics, to ensure that by the time I was acquitted and discharged, my time in the police service was due. So it was a calculated thing by the prosecution along with whoever was behind it. They couldn't afford to see me wear uniform after my acquittal. I don't think they could be able to look into my face, and so they were scared of it. They don't want to do that. They don't want to see me in uniform, and that's what they did.
Now, sir, what are you going to do? Are you going to sue for malicious prosecution? And even if you did, how are you going to buy yourself food? and feed your family and survive?
Let me first of all address the issue of survive. By the grace of God, I've survived a lot of times in the police service. I've told you my ordeal, dismissal here and there, and much of it. So I'm not used to the life where I always get things from the police service. Maybe what they succeeded in doing was to deny me some of the things I used to do, teaching here and there, and making little money here and there. I may have to go back to some of the teaching that I was doing, because remember I told people my subject area is a rare one. People talk about human rights, but how many people have PhD in human rights? Mm-hmm. I think we are not even 5 in Ghana. I can tell you, frankly speaking. And I can mention where those who have it are. They are the universities teaching. I found myself in the police service. I hope I can get something in that area and do, or elsewhere. But coming back to what next? For now, we will concentrate on ensuring that my interdiction arrears are cleared. Remember that I'm entitled to promotion now because I have been on this rank since 2017. And even when you look back, my promotion mates, my juniors, some of my people I taught in academy are commissioners. Mm-hmm. So we'll be appealing to the police administration to restore me to my rank, because I need those ones to be able to calculate my retirement. So we'll do that. And I believe that they will see a lot of sense in it. If they see it, fine. Otherwise, I'm a court person now, and will not hesitate to go back to the court. But we could also wait for. We are looking at a lot of. We are considering a lot of things, and then talking about suing. Well, it's also on the table. We will not leave it out because of some of the things that we suffered. Definitely, I would not pretend that things were easy. I would not pretend. I have been strong. And I've kept my family strong because I was strong. And I kept assuring them that, look, a day like this will come. And they believed me, and therefore they stood for me. But behind the scenes, a lot of things may have happened. My relatives and family people suffered because of their association with me. And I don't want to go into details because they are still working where they are. And therefore mentioning their names and other things is going to put them in more trouble. And those are some of the people who say, hey, please don't talk. I've defied them and I'm talking. They are now used to it, the fact that, well, he will talk anyway. And therefore, we may sue, but that one is also something under consideration. As for food, livelihood, by the grace of God, we'll survive and we'll get it. And when I sue them or when I get my arrears, I'll survive on that for some time. And then life goes on.
Sir, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for the
so
privilege.
Grateful to you for telling this story. And even telling this story demands some courage. I'm sure that many people are inspired by you. And we'd like to thank you so very much for coming to our studio. And never forget that this is your home.
Thanks.
Anytime. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Welcome
Thank
for the
you.
privilege.
Yeah. Well, viewers, we always say it. It's not a cliche, it's the reality. The best is on Pan-African television. Best in news, current affairs, entertainment, sports. Everything happens here. So please stay with us until we meet again next week. Bye-bye.
Amena PENDREAM TV ase. Now, so far so good. Say open online portal e wo Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.
Mame fana se ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV de ose dem yopo.